Welcome back. It's time for not just another book talk video, but for my book battle, for my reading wrap up for September 2021. This should be a really exciting book battle. I hope you're ready. Technically, in Goodreads, I've got 18 titles listed as what I've read this month, but some of them are short stories, and the entire Unwind series, which is 6 of them, I listen to all as audiobooks. And I listen to audiobooks quickly. I think that in general, most audiobooks are narrated way too slowly. So most audiobooks I put on a 2.0 speed and I'm able to listen to them, while I do other things. Just so you can try and pick what you want to root for, I'll list out what the books are here at the beginning, and then we can go into each bracket, determine the bracket winners, and that'll give us 4 books that go to semifinals and ultimately 2 books that end up in finals. My cat just jumped up on the desk. Sorry if there are background noises. Alright, we've got in the horror bracket, When Things Get Dark, short stories inspired by Shirley Jackson. I'm going to put that up against Beyond the Veil, a horror short story collection. Then I've got Misery by Stephen King, which I'll put up against The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, also by Stephen King. My second bracket this month is science fiction and vampires. The vampires are Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno Garcia and Empire the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. The science fiction is Red Rising prequel Sons of Ares Volume 2, the graphic novel, up against The Year Before the End, which is a sci-fi heist novel. That's Pierce Brown against Vidar Hogstad. For bracket number 3, I've got the Unwind series. I'm going to put the first book, the short story that's 1.5, and the second book in a group against each other. Then I'm going to put books 3 and 4 with the short stories for 4.5 together. They're all by Neil Shusterman. So basically, we're going to figure out what I think is the best book in the Unwind series. Bracket 4 is fantasy. I'm putting Kings of the Wild, a humorous fantasy novel by Nicholas Eames, up against A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. I'm also putting the Dark Tower series book 2, The Drawing of 3, the third book in the month by Stephen King, up against As You Like It, the play by William Shakespeare, which I know some people might argue isn't really fantasy, but it feels like a fantasy story to me, so it's the best place to put it in the brackets. Let's go back to bracket 1. Which book will win the horror bracket this time? We've got When Things Get Dark up against Beyond the Veil. They are both collections of short stories. Both of them had some stories that were really good, and both of them had some stories that were not as good. Ultimately, it's just going to come down to which one did I enjoy more, and that's the stories inspired by Shirley Jackson. So, When Things Get Dark is advancing to the next round. The second part of this bracket is Misery up against The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. I like both of these stories a whole lot. The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon has a girl who gets lost in the woods. She's separated from her family. She's trying to survive. It's got a really fantastic ending. Misery is now one of my all-time favorite books. Just going to tell you that here at the beginning of the competition. That villainous character, Annie Wilkes, is just terrifying. What she does to the writer, Paul Sheldon, in that story. As much as The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon was an interesting story with a great ending, I'm going with Misery to advance. That means When Things Get Dark, the short stories are going to lose out. Misery is just the better book overall. So Misery is advancing. Misery will be the winner. Let's take a look at bracket number 2. I've put Certain Dark Things up against Empire of the Vampire because they're both vampire novels. Empire of the Vampire is more of a fantasy novel. When I did my review for it, I was nitpicking that the cussing and expletives felt out of place in the fantasy setting. Sorry, the cats just won't stop making noises. In contrast to that, Silvia Moreno Garcia's novel, Certain Dark Things, felt very smooth. I really liked the characters in that one. They seemed more realistic, even though it's a neon or neo-noir vampire urban fantasy kind of story. So Certain Dark Things is going to advance to the next round. For science fiction, the Red Rising prequel, Sons of Ares Volume 2, is an excellent graphic novel, revealing revealing more details of what happened before the initial Red Rising book, and that's fun. It's a whole lot of fun. Unfortunately, though, I felt that The Year Before the End was even more fun. The author had a great way of creating suspense while also providing a lot of technical information, and I enjoy that for science fiction. So The Year Before the End is advancing to have to compete against certain dark things, and I don't envy any book that has to do that, because Silvia Moreno Garcia has become one of my favorite authors, and I really enjoyed that story. So Certain Dark Things is going to win the Sci-Fi and Vampires bracket and advance to the semifinals. Alright, we have figured out half of our semifinals bracket. So exciting. Let's move on to bracket 3. Neil Shusterman. I'm just going to toss out the 1.5 book. It's really a short story / novella. I loved it. I thought it was great, and I highly recommend it, but in some ways, I don't necessarily think it's fair to put it up against book 1 and book 2 of the series, which are longer stories, full novels. So when I look at Unwind Book 1, which is a story that has a character on the run trying to survive when his parents decide that they are going to send him to be unwound. This is a futuristic, dystopian type of society in which parents are allowed to basically abort their children until the age of 18. It's a shocking, controversial idea, but Neil Shusterman works it really well in this setting. I think the first book deserves to advance, even though the second book is great. The second book has a Frankenstein type of story going on, because when people are unwound in this society, the concept that this was sold on was that they're not really being killed, their body parts are being taken and given to other people and reused. So in a sense, they live on through their body parts becoming parts of other people. It's a freaky idea. Alright, so we've determined that Unwind Book 1 is advancing to the next part. Now we need to look books 3, 4, and 4.5. Similarly to what I just said with book 1.5, I'm going to toss book 4.5 out here. I don't think it can compete with books 3 and 4 as well. As far as books 3 and 4 go, I did enjoy book 3, but I liked book 4 a lot more because it was the culmination of the series. I know there's a 4.5, but that's really just kind of side stories and epilogues. Book 4 is where it's at. The conclusion to this series, because I basically binged them as audiobooks, it really hit me emotionally. I really like the way that Neil Shusterman brought things together, and I can't give you spoilers, but it's good. So we'll advance book 4, and that means that the winner of this bracket is either going to be the first book in the series or the last book in the series, book 1 or book 4, and that's a tough one to decide upon, because I like the way that the concept was introduced in book 1, but I like the way that the characters evolved, basically fulfilled their destinies in book 4. At the end of the day, I'm going to go with book 1 though. Let's advance book 1 for bracket number 3, the bracket that's all about the Unwind series. We've got an exciting semifinals forming up here. All 3 of these books so far could be the winner of the month. Let's get to bracket 4 for fantasy. Kings of the Wild. So much fun. I know I nitpicked some when I did my review of it, but it is a really fun, humorous fantasy story, getting an adventuring party back together again for one last mission to save the daughter of one of the party members. A lot of comedy along the way. It's up against a Wizard of Earthsea, which is not funny. It is not a funny story. It is a traditional fantasy story. It does a nice job being a traditional fantasy story. I enjoyed it, but overall, the read that is more fun and more in the spirit of what's being published today is Kings of the Wild. So I'm going to advance Kings of the Wild to the next part. The second part of this bracket is the drawing of 3, which is part of the Dark Tower series, up against As You Like It, a play by William Shakespeare. As much as I love Stephen King, the book, the drawing of the 3, it was so weird and out there, and in some ways good, really good. Some of the scenes were a lot of fun, but some of the scenes were painful. Some of the scenes were somewhat difficult, in my opinion. But I really enjoyed As You Like It. The play by William Shakespeare was not painful to me, even though I think it's one of Shakespeare's weakest plays. I'm going to advance As You Like It because it's a fun comedy, and this month I was more in the mood for fun, humorous stuff. Okay, we've got Kings of the Wild against As You Like It. Both of these are really funny stories. At the end of the day, though, as far as being a good story, Kings of the Wild has a better plot. It has a better plot line, a better story arc, then As You Like It. As You Like It kind of meanders around as the characters meander around the woods. So Kings of the Wild is advancing for bracket 4. This is a semifinals round like no other. Really, truly looking at Misery by Stephen King, Certain Dark Things by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, Unwind by Neil Shusterman, and Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. I can't help but think that all 4 of these books, any 4 of these books, could be a best read of the month, but we can't have 4 books win. So we're going to have to determine some winners here in semifinals. Misery is up against Certain Dark Things. These books set out to accomplish very different goals. Certain Dark Things has a vampire that's on the run trying to survive. It also has this interesting, I want to say kid, but it's not really a kid. It's a homeless young adult living on the streets, and that character is able to bond with this female vampire as she is trying to avoid being destroyed by another vampire. It's a really interesting story. It's very different from what Misery is accomplishing by Stephen King. I think that Misery is one of Stephen King's best novels, even though I know I need to read a lot more Stephen King. It's so powerful. Stephen King's going to win this one and advance to the finals round. For the other half of semifinals, we have Unwind by Neil Shusterman against Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. This is science fiction against fantasy. And again, we're looking at 2 very different stories. Unwind does have some humorous elements, but it is not meant to be funny in the way that Kings of the Wild is set out to be humorous throughout the story. Ultimately, the book that I enjoyed more out of these 2 is Unwind. I just liked the way that this concept came together from Neil Shusterman, and there were things about Kings of the Wild, as much as I enjoyed it, that I was nitpicking along the way, but there is nothing that I was nitpicking about Neil Shusterman's book, Unwind. Alright, we now have a finals round of Misery by Stephen King up against Unwind by Neil Shusterman, and I've got to be honest with you, I can't pick a winner out of these 2 books. I just can't. The year is shaping up to where after I have winners in October, November, and December, we're going to be able to have an amazing super book battle at the end of the year. This is my 3rd tie for the year, so I've used up 3 out of 4 of the wild cards. I may be asking you guys to help me pick out some sort of wild card to toss into the mix to do the super book battle at the end of the year. Alright, I hope that you enjoyed the reading wrap up and the competition as different books went up head to head against one another. Every day is a good day for a book battle or a book talk. Peace.